has to do even with astronomical alignments, the positioning of planets or stars, because it actually helps to bend and curve time-space, if you will. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Well, you don't have to do too much research into magic before you realize that certain beings can only be invoked on certain nights, and that you can only contact certain spirits on certain days. And I found that kind of interesting because that means that they're subject to some set of rules. And in the Necronomicon specifically, it speaks about these spheres as if each dimension is in fact a sphere, which is how Einstein described spheres, described a universe as this ball that's just expanding, and that's pretty much the same terminology used in the Necronomicon. And in the Necronomicon, they're described as constantly wandering, and sometimes these universes bump into each other. Sometimes the bubble of one will bump into the bubble of another, and during that time, something can be seen from that other universe and interacts, and so that's that.
Really interesting. And so, in terms of Necronomicon, when did you get your eyes up to this first? Because again, as I mentioned in the introduction here, there's many different versions of the Necronomicon, various authors as well, but it seems to have a root. It goes back into the ancient world almost, if you will, and it compiles a lot of different knowledge about demons, about mythological, potentially then characters that were around from the Babylonian, Sumerian, Akkadian world almost. But when did you first look into the Necronomicon, Michael?
I accidentally downloaded it as an ebook, and I just read through my ebooks as I always do, and I stumbled across the more complete version of the Necronomicon, the first one. The first one was written by Abdul al-Hazred a man named Abdul al-Hazred right around 730 A.D., and was translated by Dr. John Dee about 1,000 years later. And then right around the beginning of the 20th century was moved into a library at Harvard University. Since then, like you said, there's been many Necronomicons, but the Necronomicon that I read, or all of them ring true, but the one I read had so many connections to other books, satanic stuff, and it used terminology from every single mythology, and it just seemed to ring true. So at the end, I didn't really care whether people thought it was H.P. Lovecraft or whoever. I didn't really care who wrote it. It was so full of the truth that I was willing to analyze it.
And indeed you have. There's many interesting aspects that you bring up in regards to this, and even the story of Abdul al-Hazred is very interesting as well. I think he was referred to as the mad Arab as well. I've seen in some texts. And he has some kind of knowledge here, it seems like, then, to basically what is going on in the other realms, in the other dimensions. But is there anything else you can mention about this character, Abdul al-Hazred? Where did he come from, and do you know how he got access to this knowledge?
Well, this is so far away in time. This is so long ago that direct records are very difficult. You're pretty much just going to have to infer a lot of information as you read through his text. It appears as though somebody who has crossed into the other side and then came back to our side to tell us what was going on, which is not usual. Usually everybody in the Illuminati just stays quiet and keeps all their secrets to themselves. But this book appeared to be a little different.
What can you say in terms of the Lovecraft connection, H.P. Lovecraft, because he's another character which seems to go into some of these deities as well. He obviously have written about Cthulhu and things and characters like this, other demons. But Lovecraft seems to have an interesting connection there as well. Have you looked into him and his work as well then?
Sure. It appears as though he built a lot of his mythos, is what is called the mythos, based on a real book, the original Necronomicon, and it seems as though he just pretty much is rewriting stories. What's interesting is you won't find anything from the Simon Necronomicon, any other Necronomicons, or H.P. Lovecraft that violates or contradicts the original Necronomicon, the original version. So, yeah, I've looked into it, but it's clear that they're sharing some kind of secret tradition. There's some kind of secret tradition happening in the background where he just started taking names from a document that did exist, probably within the Illuminati circles.
And specifically, if we talk about some of the things that are contained within these documents and in the various versions of Necronomicon and so forth, what is the general outline? Is it about how to invoke various gods, get in contact with demons or beings then that are from outside of our own realm, but still seems to be very much connected, if you will, with the mythology that we have here on Earth? If we look back to the Sumerian, as I mentioned before, and Babylonian gods, for instance, that are a lot of names from their mythology that comes up in these texts. Isn't that right?
Yeah. The book goes through stuff that I had only found in very obscure places. Mentions of the 9 gates, gates to heaven and hell, portals. The book itself is not entirely a grimoire, like a completely demon conjuring book. A lot of it includes just the history of man and the nature of the demons and what abilities that can be granted. So it's in the nature of the gods and their respective personalities. So it's a demon conjuring manual, but it's got a lot of other stuff in there, things that sound like Atlantis and cities at the poles. He just mentions so much. He covers so much ground, UFO sounding descriptions, and just covered so much ground.
What are some of your favorite parts? Is there anything specifically in there that kind of catched your attention right away? Something that you felt, I got to look into this area because this is interesting.
The 9 gates, frankly. The 9 gates, I had heard that in many satanic texts and documents from various places, the 9 gates was the first thing that rang true for me, because I had heard that in many places where you could use a gate to go to other dimensions, and that's exactly what he started to describe. And then you got stuff like the movie The 9 Gates, which kind of lays it all out for you in a joking manner, but it was the 9 gates. It's the ladder of lights that the Masons acknowledge and the Persians acknowledge, and there's this, the ladder up into heaven. It had a lot of things in it that were downright true.
So what's your analysis of it if we talk about the film a little bit more, the Ninth Gate? Polanski, of course, Roman Polanski, behind this one. He's made a lot of interesting films throughout his career. He's, of course, right now, don't know how this process is going, but he's obviously been banned from the U.S. because of a pedophilia case that happened a while back, and back in the 70s or something like that, and he hasn't returned to the States since. But when he took a trip over to Switzerland, I think he was extradited to the U.S. or if it was France or something like that. I can't remember the whole story right now. But what do you think Polanski is doing there in the film, and what do you think his kind of purpose is for bringing this onto the scene, making it known, if you know what I mean, to people generally?
Well, they're not afraid to make anything known. They put their symbols on the dollar bill. It's just another way of them laughing at you. A part of my series is that they are telling a very real story, and they just keep retelling the same stories, and as long as people aren't looking for it, they won't find it. So I don't think he has any other agenda aside from hidden in plain sight, which is very typical of them.
Yes, absolutely. And so if we talk a little bit more about the 9 gates, there is potentially Kabbalistic origins to this as well. We're talking about different spheres, basically, of dimensions, and tapping into these different spheres or going through these different gates give them people potentially access to different beings that are residing in these realms. And there seems to be even hierarchies in these realms and so forth. And in your work and some of the documents that you go through, is it explained, for instance, in the Necronomicon, how it's structured and what entity, so to speak, belongs in what dimension or behind what gate, things like this? Yeah, he does give you details on how to open the respective gates, the god or goddess that you will find on the other side. He doesn't give too much description on what it looks like. It's mainly the characters that are there. And a lot of the gods that we know of, sun god, conspiracy theorists, Ishtar, we've all heard Ishtar.